A few hours before my brother's wedding, I received a message. Don't go to your brother's wedding. Look inside your husband's garage. A tip. At first, I thought it was a prank. But when I opened the garage door, I was left speechless. You know, sometimes life throws you a curveball so hard it shatters your entire world. And for me, that moment hit just a few hours before my brother's wedding, all because of one anonymous text message that told me to check my husband's garage. What I found in there didn't just expose a betrayal, it blew up everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, and even my own family. It was supposed to be the perfect day. My younger brother, Daniel, was getting married to Victoria, and the whole family was buzzing. Daniel, our golden boy, was finally settling down with someone he adored. I remember watching him with Victoria, how his eyes sparkled when he spoke about her, and as his older sister, my heart just swelled with happiness for him. Our apartment was alive with pre-wedding chaos. Mom was in the kitchen, baking traditional pies, Dad was meticulously checking the guest list, and I was just finishing getting ready. My husband, Mark, had already left, claiming some urgent client meeting. Don't worry, sweetheart, I'll be there in time for the ceremony, he'd said, kissing me goodbye. His tone was casual, affectionate, utterly normal. And yet, something about it left me feeling profoundly unsettled. I remember looking at myself in the mirror. I saw a confident, successful woman, loved, grounded. 10 years of marriage to Mark had been peaceful, secure. We had our disagreements, sure, but nothing major. Life felt steady, content. Or so I thought. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I frowned. A short, chilling message popped up. Don't go to the wedding. Check your husband's garage. My heart skipped a beat. What the hell was that supposed to mean? Who would send something like that? I tried to shake it off, a prank, a wrong number. But this icy dread, it just wouldn't fade. It grew heavier by the second. The apartment, which moments ago had been so full of warmth, now felt hushed, haunted by Mark's absence. I reread the message. Check your husband's garage. Why? What could possibly be there? Mark had never hidden anything from me. He'd always been honest, hadn't he? I tried calling him, but no answer. He's probably still in that meeting, I told myself, but my chest tightened. Panic started to rise. I tried to distract myself, helping Mom in the kitchen, but the words echoed in my mind, don't go to the wedding. Check the garage. They were like splinters, lodged deep. I knew, just knew, I couldn't ignore it. Something was off. But what was I supposed to do? Drive to his garage? It seemed absurd. Mark would be furious, he'd think I didn't trust him. Yet, how could I shake this gnawing feeling if I didn't check? I glanced at the clock. The ceremony was still hours away. Mark should have called. Nothing. And then, I remembered the spare key. He'd mentioned making a copy, just in case, and keeping it in the old keepsake box, the one with our old letters and souvenirs. My hands trembled as I opened it. There it was, a small, unassuming piece of metal that felt like it held the power to shatter my entire world. I hesitated. Was I really going to betray my own trust, my marriage, because of some anonymous text? But the fear, the crushing curiosity, the ache in my chest, they screamed louder than my doubt. I decided to go quietly. Just a quick check. No one had to know. I could just come back and pretend none of this ever happened. I slipped out of the apartment, careful not to make a sound. My parents remained oblivious. Stepping into the sunlight, the brightness stunned my eyes, but I felt no warmth, only a growing dread. The garage wasn't far, just a few blocks. I walked quickly, my mind a storm, trying to block out the screaming thoughts. When I arrived, the steel units loomed, a lifeless row. I found Mark's. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. I pulled the key, slid it into the lock. Click. The door creaked open. It was dark, smelled of oil and old rubber. I turned on my phone's flashlight, scanning the room. Mark's dusty old Lincoln in the corner. Tools, spare parts, old boxes. Nothing suspicious. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. It was nothing. Just a cruel joke. I turned to leave, and then I froze. Something in the corner. A large cardboard box, covered by a worn blanket. My feet moved before I could think. I pulled back the fabric. Inside were things that didn't belong. A woman's purse, high heels, a box from a luxury perfume brand. My stomach turned. I knew these things. They belonged to Victoria, Daniel's fiancée. My breath caught. My vision blurred as my mind scrambled. Why were Victoria's things here? In Mark's garage? My hands shaking, I reached into the box, pulled out the purse. Opened it. Wallet, makeup, keys, and photos. My heart pounded as I took out the stack, held them up to the dim light. It was Mark. And Victoria. In every single one. On a beach somewhere, clearly on vacation. Laughing, kissing, embracing like lovers. In one, he held her hand, her head on his shoulder, beaming. In another, a seaside cafe, sunglasses on, looking like a couple straight out of a travel ad. I staggered back, clutching the photos like they were burning my hands. The garage seemed to close in. The air felt thick. My legs nearly gave out. Everything shattered. The man I had loved, the brother I adored, the family I had fought so hard to protect, it had all been a lie. A cruel, tangled lie. Still dazed, I reached to the bottom of the box and found a folder. I opened it, unsure if I could take any more, but unable to stop myself. Inside were printed messages, handwritten notes, snippets of conversations between Mark and Victoria. I read, my eyes flying across the lines, my heart bleeding with every word. Baby, I'm so glad we're doing this together. I know it's wrong, but I can't live without you. You're my life. I'm marrying Daniel for the future. You know this won't last. Once I'm his wife, we'll finally be together. You'll leave Emma and we'll be free. My hands began to tremble violently. I dropped the folder onto the hood of the car, barely able to breathe. Victoria had never loved Daniel. She was using him as a front so she and Mark could have the life they secretly planned. And Mark. My husband. He had stood in our home, kissed me this morning, smiled like everything was fine. All of it had been a performance. My first instinct was pure, primal rage. A deep, pulsing fury that started in my chest and surged through every limb. I wanted to scream, to smash this garage to pieces, to call them both and expose everything in one brutal, thunderous strike. But I didn't. Instead, I stood there in the dim, dusty light, surrounded by the evidence of their monstrous betrayal, and let the quiet fury settle into something colder. Something like resolve. I couldn't let this happen. I couldn't let my brother walk into a marriage built on such cruel lies. I couldn't let these two destroy him the way they had destroyed me. I pulled out my phone and began taking photos of everything. The shoes, the perfume box, the purse, the photographs, the notes. Every single piece of evidence. I captured it all carefully, methodically. I knew I had to be smart. If Mark found out I'd been there, he might destroy the evidence or spin some excuse. I couldn't risk that. Once I was done, I carefully placed everything back exactly as I found it. I wiped down anything I'd touched, trying not to leave a single trace. Then I turned off my flashlight and stepped out of the garage, locking the door behind me. Outside, the world felt different. Colder. Thinner. Unreal. My thoughts raced as I walked back to my car. What now? Should I go to the wedding and pretend nothing's wrong? Or tell Daniel right away? I knew a wedding was no place for this kind of truth. Not in front of guests, not in the middle of joy and celebration. But I also couldn't stay silent. Not anymore. I climbed into my car, staring at the steering wheel for a moment, trying to steady myself. Then I made a decision. I would talk to Daniel alone, somewhere quiet, private. I dialed his number. It rang endlessly. Then he picked up. "Hey, Em, what's going on? Why aren't you at the venue yet?" He sounded happy, distracted. "Daniel," I said, doing everything I could to keep my voice steady. "I need to talk to you. It's important." "What's wrong?" "Tell me," he pressed. "I can't. Not over the phone. It's too personal. Can we meet? Just for a few minutes?" He paused. I could almost hear the shift in his breathing. "Now, Emma? The wedding's in less than an hour." "I know," I said. "But it's about Victoria." Silence. Then a quiet exhale. "Okay," he said at last. "Where?" "Back entrance of the venue, half an hour." "Please, Daniel." "I'll be there," he said, and hung up. I leaned my head back against the seat. My heart was still racing, my hands cold. But I had done the hardest part. I had made the choice to tell him the truth, no matter what it cost. I arrived at the venue just a few minutes before our arranged time. As I pulled up, I saw Daniel pacing near the back entrance, glancing at his watch, clearly agitated. His tuxedo looked sharp, his hair freshly styled, but there was tension in his posture, worry in the way he kept turning his head. I parked the car and stepped out, clutching the envelope that now held the printed photos and messages. Daniel spotted me and came over quickly, his face filled with concern. "What's going on, Em? You're scaring me." I didn't answer right away. I opened my bag, took out the envelope, and handed it to him. "Look for yourself," I said softly. "You deserve to know the truth." He frowned as he took it. He pulled out the photos and began to flip through them one by one. At first, he smiled, a nervous, puzzled smile, as though he thought it might be a prank. But as he kept turning pages, the color drained from his face. His brow tightened, his lips parted, but no words came out. When he reached the messages, he froze. He scanned each one with growing disbelief. Then, quietly, his hands began to shake. He looked up at me, eyes wide and glistening. "Is this real?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "This can't be real." "I wish it wasn't," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. "But I found it all in Mark's garage. I saw it with my own eyes." Daniel looked back down at the photos, gripping them tightly. His chest rose and fell in uneven waves. The reality was sinking in. Slow. Brutal. Undeniable. "Why?" he whispered. "Why would she do this to me?" I stepped forward and gently placed a hand on his arm. "I don't know," I said. "But you can't go through with this, Daniel. Not with her. Not after this." He pulled away slightly, pressing a palm to his face as if trying to stop his head from spinning. "The wedding's in an hour. The guests, Mom and Dad, everyone's already here. How the hell am I supposed to do this?" "You don't have to do it alone," I said. "I'll help you. Whatever you need, we'll get through it together." Daniel looked at me for a long moment. Then finally, he nodded. The decision had landed. It hurt like hell, but somewhere deep in his eyes, I saw something harden. Conviction. Truth. "Let's go," he said. Inside the venue, the atmosphere buzzed with excitement. Music played softly, chatter filled the air. Guests were seated, sipping champagne, smiling in anticipation. Victoria stood near the floral archway, radiant in white, nervously adjusting her veil. She turned as Daniel approached. "Danny, sweetheart, where have you? There won't be a wedding," he said, his voice calm, firm, unflinching. The room stilled. The murmurs stopped. Victoria blinked, stunned. "What? What are you saying? Is this some kind of joke?" "I know," Daniel said. "I know everything. About you. About Mark. I've seen the pictures. I've read the messages." Her face twisted first in confusion, then panic. No, that's not true. That's a lie. Who told you that? This is slander." "It doesn't matter who told me," he replied, his voice steady. "What matters is I know the truth, and I'm not going to marry someone who's been lying to me." Victoria's voice cracked, sharp and shrill. "How dare you? How dare you ruin this day? Do you know what you're doing?" "I know exactly what I'm doing," Daniel said. "I'm stopping this before it becomes something even worse." She turned toward me, her eyes wild. "It was you, wasn't it? You've always hated me. You've always been jealous." "Don't be ridiculous, Victoria," I said coolly. "I'm not jealous. I'm just protecting my brother." "Protecting?" Victoria hissed. "You mean sabotaging? You wanted to destroy our happiness." "You were never going to be happy," I replied. "Not when it was all built on lies." Victoria trembled with rage. She stepped toward me, hand raised, but before she could strike, Daniel caught her wrist. "Don't," he said firmly. "Just don't. Get out of here, Victoria. And don't ever come back." Her mouth fell open in disbelief. She yanked her hand free and looked around the room at the stunned guests, at the ruined flowers, at her dreams crumbling beneath her heels. Then, with a furious cry, she stormed down the aisle and out the door, slamming it behind her. Daniel stood frozen for a moment. Then slowly, he sank onto a nearby chair. His shoulders sagged, his hands clasped together tightly. The silence in the room was suffocating. "What happens now?" he whispered. I crouched beside him. "Now you breathe," I said gently. "And then we start over." Shortly after the wedding was called off, Mark approached me. His face was pale, his eyes nervous. "Emma," he asked, his voice hesitant, uneasy. "What's going on? Why did Daniel cancel the wedding?" I met his eyes, standing tall. There was no more fear in me, only clarity. "Because he knows, Mark. He knows about you and Victoria." Mark stood still, like he'd been struck. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came. I could see the panic blooming behind his eyes. "What? What are you talking about?" he stammered. "It doesn't matter," I said, my tone ice cold. "What matters is that it's over. He's not going to marry your mistress." Mark's face darkened. "You told him," he hissed. "You ruined everything." "I saved him," I replied. "And I saved myself." "You ruined everything the day you betrayed us." His jaw clenched. "You'll regret this. I won't forgive you for this." And then he turned and left, storming out of the venue without another word. I watched him go with a heavy heart, not because I mourned what we had, but because I knew he wouldn't let it end quietly. Mark would retaliate. That was his nature. But I no longer feared him. I was done being the trusting, naive woman I once was. His betrayal had burned that part of me away. A few days later, Mark left our home. He packed his things and disappeared without a goodbye or a note. I didn't try to stop him. I knew there was nothing left to fight for. Our marriage had died the moment I found that red purse in the garage. Silence settled over the apartment like a heavy curtain. I sat down on the couch, closed my eyes, and allowed myself to feel the pain, the sorrow, the disbelief, the fear. But beneath it all, there was something else, too. A sense of release. Of forward motion. Of freedom. The next few days passed in a haze. I began gathering paperwork for the divorce, meeting with a lawyer, trying to process the emotional wreckage. It was exhausting, but I forced myself to stay strong for Daniel and for myself. Daniel, too, was struggling. The betrayal had cut him deeply, but he tried to put one foot in front of the other. We leaned on each other during those first brutal weeks, bound even more tightly now by what we had both survived. One evening, Daniel came over for dinner. He looked tired, but more alive than he had in days. There was something different in his eyes, something hopeful. "Thank you, Em," he said as he pulled me into a hug. "You saved me. I don't know what I would have done without you." "You'll always have me," I replied softly. "We'll get through this together." "I know," he said, pulling back with a small smile. "I've been thinking. I want to start something new. Maybe my own business. I've had this idea for a long time. I think I'm ready." I smiled. "That's wonderful, Daniel. I believe in you. I know you can do it." We sat together for hours that evening, talking about the future, remembering the past, dreaming about what could be. We had both been broken, but we had not been destroyed. In our shared pain, we had found something solid, something unbreakable. The divorce process, to my surprise, went relatively smoothly. There had been no prenuptial agreement, which ended up working in my favor. Everything we'd built over the years, the apartment, the car, the accounts, were split evenly. Mark didn't contest it. It was as if he just wanted to wash his hands of the whole thing. I didn't feel victorious. I felt relieved, like the nightmare was finally starting to end. One evening, while sorting through old boxes in the garage and preparing to move out, my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize flashed across the screen. My first instinct was to let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. "Hello, Emma." "It's Andrew," said the voice on the other end. The name was faintly familiar. "Andrew? I'm sorry, I don't. I worked with Mark," he said gently. "At the firm. You came to the office once or twice. I doubt you'd remember." Now I did. Andrew had been quiet, reserved, someone who faded easily into the background. I'd seen him in passing, never exchanged more than a few polite words. "Yes, I remember," I said, my tone cautious. "Is something wrong?" "I just thought you deserved to know," he continued. "I was the one who sent you that anonymous message before Daniel's wedding." My breath caught. I went still. "You?" I said in disbelief. "You sent it? But, why?" There was a long pause. Then, with a touch of bitterness, Andrew said, "Because Victoria tried it with me too. Before Mark. She tried to use me, manipulate me. She wanted something, a promotion, leverage, I don't know. When I found out what she was doing with Mark and what she planned with your brother, I couldn't let it happen. I had to say something, but I was afraid. I didn't think anyone would believe me, so I stayed anonymous." I was stunned. I had never considered that there might be someone else. Another person tangled in the lies. Another victim. "I don't know what to say," I whispered. You saved me. You saved Daniel." "I just wanted justice," Andrew replied. "I watched Mark deceive you. I watched Victoria deceive Daniel, and I couldn't sit back." I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of it all settle into something clearer. This man, quiet, unseen, had been the one to tip the first domino, and it had changed everything. "Thank you," I said. "You did the right thing." "You deserve the truth," Andrew said. And then the call ended. After our conversation, I sat in silence for a long time, holding my phone, letting the weight of the truth settle inside me. So, I hadn't imagined it. My instincts had been right. And I hadn't been alone. Not entirely. There had been someone out there, quietly watching, quietly caring, someone who had dared to reach out when no one else would. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel so isolated in my pain. I realized that my strength hadn't come just from within. It had come from connection, from my bond with Daniel, from the courage of a stranger, from the small, brave acts of truth that shattered the web of lies around me. That night, something shifted. I no longer wanted to dwell on the past. I had spent too many days drowning in sorrow, betrayal, and fear. I was tired of standing still in the ruins. It was time to rebuild. I made a decision. I sold my share of the apartment and bought a modest new place in a different part of the city, somewhere quiet, unfamiliar, free of old shadows. I left my job at the firm where I had worked for over a decade. It had been stable, respectable, but it no longer sparked anything in me. I found a new position, one with more creativity, more growth, more life. For the first time in years, I felt like the world was opening instead of closing. Daniel, too, was healing. Slowly but steadily. He found a new job and took up photography, something he had loved as a teenager but abandoned somewhere along the road to adulthood. He started traveling, even if only to nearby towns. He would call me from the road, describing the sunsets he captured, the faces of strangers, the feeling of movement again after so much stillness. Our bond deepened through these calls. We had always been close, but now there was something unbreakable between us. One afternoon, while walking home from the grocery store, I turned a corner and nearly bumped into Mark. He looked older, worn, thinner than I remembered. There were lines around his mouth that hadn't been there before, and his eyes were shadowed with something that might have been regret. When he saw me, he froze. He lowered his eyes as if hoping I wouldn't notice him. But I did. And something inside me told me not to look away. "Mark," I said calmly. "Wait." He stopped, turned slowly. There was shame in his face, maybe even sorrow. "Emma, I've been wanting to say something." I looked at him steadily, without anger, without fear. "I'm sorry," he said, barely more than a whisper. "For everything." I didn't answer right away. I let the silence stretch between us, not out of cruelty, but out of care. When I finally spoke, my voice was clear and steady. "I forgive you." Mark blinked, startled. "You do?" "I'm not doing it for you," I said. "I'm doing it for me. I don't want to carry it anymore. I don't want to hate you. I want to move on." He nodded slowly. His lips pressed together. I hope you find happiness, Emma. Real happiness." "I will," I said. "And I hope you do, too." I turned and walked away, not with anger, not with sorrow, but with peace. In the days that followed, I returned to a calm routine. But it was a different kind of calm, one born not from comfort, but from resilience. I had been through fire, and I had emerged stronger, clearer, more certain of who I was. I understood now that betrayal wasn't the end. It was a rupture, a painful, necessary breaking point that forced me to examine everything I believed, everything I wanted, everything I deserved. It was the beginning of something new. I no longer doubted my instincts. I no longer clung to things that no longer served me. I valued truth even when it hurt. I valued myself. And I was no longer afraid of change. There were still hard days, moments when the past tugged at my sleeve like a ghost, refusing to be forgotten. But I knew how to face it now. I had tools. I had strength. I had people. Daniel. Andrew. New friends. A life waiting to unfold. I stood at my window one morning, coffee in hand, watching the soft light fill my new apartment. There were no voices from the past, no regrets tapping at the glass. Just silence. And in that silence, I smiled. Spring came gently that year. The city seemed to breathe again, with trees dressing in soft green, and the air filled with the scent of beginnings. I found myself walking more, lingering in bookstores, listening to music I hadn't touched in years. I bought a new notebook and started writing again. Thoughts, impressions, fragments of myself rediscovered. One Saturday morning, I received a text from Daniel. Want to go hiking? I found this trail outside the city. Looks beautiful. I smiled. Count me in. We spent the day wandering through hills and wildflowers, talking about everything and nothing. Daniel had brought his camera, and at one point he turned to me and said, "You look lighter, Em. Like you finally let go." "I have," I answered. "For the first time in a long while, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." We sat on a rock, the sky stretching above us, the wind soft and warm. "Do you ever think about her?" he asked quietly. "Victoria?" He nodded. "Sometimes," I admitted, but not with anger anymore. Just as a lesson. A reminder that people aren't always what they seem. That you have to trust your gut. That even the deepest betrayal doesn't define who you are. It just reveals who they are. Daniel nodded, thoughtful. I think I needed to hear that. Later that evening, after Daniel dropped me off, I stood for a long time in my new living room, watching the fading light spill across the walls. The scars were still there, somewhere beneath the surface, but they didn't sting like they used to. They were quiet now, faded reminders, not open wounds. And then a soft knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened it and found a small envelope lying on the mat. No name, no address. I picked it up and opened it. Inside was a single photograph. It was from years ago. Daniel and I, laughing in the backyard at a family barbecue, arms around each other, faces sunlit and carefree. On the back, in neat handwriting, it read, "Some truths are worth fighting for." I stared at it, a lump rising in my throat. I hadn't heard from Andrew since that last call. I didn't know where he was or what had happened to him. But this small, quiet gesture was enough. I took the photo, put it into a frame, and set it on my bookshelf. In the weeks that followed, I started saying yes to new things. I joined a local book club, took a weekend painting class, met people I would never have crossed paths with before. I even went on a date, just one, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that I was open again. Open to the world, open to myself. My past hadn't disappeared. It had simply lost its grip. And as I lay in bed one night, the city humming softly beyond my window, I whispered to the dark, I made it. It wasn't a triumphant declaration. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, steady, true. I had walked through the wreckage. I had faced the truth. I had chosen to rise. And now I was free. What about you? Have you ever had a moment like this, where a sudden, shocking truth completely changed your path? How did you find the strength to rebuild? I'd really love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below.